Okay, we are back. I'm very happy to have back on the Goldstein on Gelt Show Julie Deane, the head of the Cambridge Satchel Company. She was on the show about a year ago. If you missed that fabulous interview, just go to goldsteinongelt.com and look it up, or even go to YouTube and look up Goldstein on Gelt and Julie Deane. Julie, a real pleasure to have you back.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
There has been a huge amount of activity in the company in the past year. Can you just give us the 1-minute summary of what's been going on?
Yeah, it was very, very big year for us. The last 12 months has seen us physically move factory to a factory 4 times the size of the factory that I set up a couple of years ago.
Unbelievable.
Then we opened 3 traditional bricks and mortar shops that you can actually walk into as a customer, as opposed to just being an e-commerce presence, which is how we started and how we've grown. But those 3 shops have been a really exciting addition to Cambridge Satchel. And then it was topped off by the investment. We took a minority investor on in January. And so the last 3 months, I've been actually working with someone by my side that knows an awful lot about business. And so that's been a new experience.
Well, it is very true, or clearly if they say the proof is in the pudding, that you have a great knack for business, having built a very, very successful company. Let's talk about this move to being bricks and mortar. Do you think that the internet perhaps is a passing fad and people are going to go back to real business?
No, I don't, not at all. But I think that it makes sense to me. I don't want to be a transient brand. And I feel very much that if you're going to be a brand with a longevity and a real chance of making a mark, then it's important in your key markets to have a bricks and mortar store where people can come in and just take a look at all of the different things that you're making at that time and really have a place to interact with our customers, hold special events and say, look, this is who we are. Come and say hello and come and visit us.
One of the concerns that a lot of people have with any company that expands is that the company begins to go out of its comfort zone and ultimately has problems because of that. Online business is one thing and bricks and mortar business is another. How have you dealt with that potential problem?
I think you're absolutely right. We're not about to start making garden implements or cars or something. I think that it was important for us to try the bricks and mortar experience, do that gradually. Over here, at least, there's this pretty new phenomenon of these pop-up shops where you're able to take on a location for 3 months or 6 months, see if it works, and then you can enter into a lease that might be for as long as 10 years,
Oh, wow.
even if you break it at 3 years or break at 5. And that really minimizes the risk. And so that's been a great way for us to test the water on our first bricks and mortar and then subsequently to test locations before we commit to them.
And that's all in England, or is that also outside?
All our 3 shops are in the UK. We have 2 in London. We have 1 in Cambridge. I have no experience with shops overseas, and so I'm not sure. But we would try to do something very similar in the way of structuring that, because it would be a very big risk to go into an overseas market and suddenly just go on day one, sign up to something that was a 10-year commitment.
Well, if we talk about the overseas market, actually, your bags have become quite popular in China, which, frankly, for a country that is quite different from the UK, was a little bit surprising. To what do you attribute that success?
Well, I was surprised that China was really taking off, and to the extent that it was taking off. Just to give you one example, we have a small shop in Covent Garden in London, and when we were seeing tourists come in and the visitors come in, a typical UK customer would buy 1 bag because it's easy for them to make a return trip if they want to come back and buy again. the typical US customer was buying 2.5, 3 bags. That's how the statistics sort of fell out.
Wow.
The Chinese customer was buying between 6 and 8 bags
In one shopping
one
spree?
transaction,
Wow.
in one transaction. And so that was very surprising to us. And the other thing that we were seeing was that when those customers were coming in, they had a very, very detailed shopping list. So these people had been on the website or were in some way very familiar with our product range because they had exactly what each, I think they were shopping for their friends or family, and they had a list of what every single person wanted, bought 6 to 8 and would go away with them. And then we were getting approached by a number of magazines, sort of Grazia, Hello, that were based in China for interviews. I'd do the interview, then they'd send me a copy of the magazine, and I'd look at it and think, well, that's a nice photo. I have no idea what the rest of it says. I hope it was very nice. So obviously, the profile of the company was growing there. And so the way we decided, we tend to be quite cautious on the way that we approach things, but we decided to go into China with a presence in Beijing and Shanghai with big partners that we already traded with here in Europe or in Hong Kong. So we went in with Lane Crawford, and we've dealt with Lane Crawford in Hong Kong for a long time. And then with Galeries Lafayette, they were opening in Beijing, and so we decided that we would go in with them in Beijing because we know that company.
So you have the strategic partners to help you along the way. We're talking with Julie Deane, who's the president of the Cambridge Satchel Company. She is a repeat visitor on the Goldstein on Gelt Show. The first time we spoke to her, she told us the fantastic story of how she started the company and built it up. And now she's been telling us about really the next phase as she's been building up the company into really quite an international force. Julia, I actually want to touch a little more on this China issue because a lot of people are talking about the overall potential economic decline in China. It had been very hot for many, many years, and it seems to have cooled off a bit, but that doesn't sound like your experience.
No, not at all. And I was very fortunate. The Prime Minister here, David Cameron, he invited me to go along with a trade delegation to China in December. And I'd never been to China before. And so going with the Prime Minister, I think now I have a completely unrealistic view of China. In that trip, I experienced no problems with customers or going through airports or any kind of travel. It all seemed amazingly well oiled. And I think that was probably more to do with my travel companion than my travel planning. But it was a fantastic insight into a market that is tremendously different, tremendously different. And so even going in on something like e-commerce, which because we were started, on digital, we feel that's what we know. China e-commerce is very different.
Okay, so that's an area that you're moving into, and we will follow you as you do that. So in the last couple of minutes, let's talk about the real radical change for any small company as it moves into the large company realm, which is to bring on outside investors. What made you make the decision to bring in a venture capital firm as an investor in the Cambridge Satchel Company?
We are the 7th fastest growing private company in the UK. We were in the fast track 100 before Christmas. And once people start realizing that the company is growing and is profitable, then all of a sudden you get so many invitations to incredibly nice lunches, and people seem very, very interested in your plans for the future. And so we were being hotly pursued and had been hotly pursued for the last couple of years, to the extent that we appointed somebody, a large accounting firm, BDO, who had experience with private equity and venture capitalists, to try and filter down to see which ones could actually bring something more than a checkbook, because you'll remember from our last interview, this company started with £600 and has been entirely self-financed. We've never had any kind of debt. And so it was never going to be the case that we would jump with somebody for money and no sort of smarts. That was never going to happen. Mm-hmm. And so for 2 years and speaking to people, it was more about what could somebody bring with them that we didn't already have, and what would we need as we look forward to the next 5 years, as we think, we're growing. What do we really lack, and what would we benefit from having? And those are the things that we wanted from any partner rather than just an investor, because an investor sounds like someone who's just going to give you money and then some really horrible hurdles that are just designed to make your life miserable every month as you sort of fail to meet targets.
That's exactly what people who are in the high-tech world often complain about when they bring on venture capital firms.
Exactly. And that's exactly what I didn't want. And so the firm that we've gone with is a company called Index Ventures, and they backed ASOS, a big digital fashion brand over here. Also Net-a-Porter, which is a really lovely fashion site. And they were also behind Skype, and they were behind some very, very interesting companies, including their investors in Moleskine, the lovely black notebooks. And so it's a variety of things, but it really speaks volumes about their strength in the digital arena. So the contacts that they could get for me to ensure that we were ahead of the game on the digital side. And yet the Moleskine side showed that when it came to product, they were very brand conscious, and they haven't tried to change the branding on the Moleskine notebook. And instead of that, they've built on it. And that was incredibly important. I didn't want somebody to come in and say, Cambridge Satchel Company, I think actually what you should be making is iPad cases and right. Make them all in China because it's cheaper then and you get a better margin. So that's what I wanted to avoid. And thankfully, that's what I have avoided. And they've been really an enormous pleasure to work with. We're only 3 months in. I might be cross afterwards, but at the moment, I am honeymooning and I'm very happy.
Well, we will follow up on that next time we bring you back on the show. Julie, we are just about out of time. It's been fascinating, and I think that for investors as well as for business people who have been listening to this discussion, they're going to be able to walk away with some fabulous insights to how to build a business over time so that people can follow you until we speak again on the show. Tell us, what is the best way that people can keep tabs on what's going on with the company?
I think the easiest way is if you go to CambridgeSatchel.com. That's our website. And then on the bottom there, depending on whether you're a Facebooker or a Twitter person or a Pinterest person or a Tumblr person, you'll be able to find the badge of your choice at the bottom.
All right, great. And we will, of course, put a link to that at the show notes at goldsteinongelt.com. Julie, thanks again for coming back.
Thank you very much for having me on.
You've been listening to the Goldstein on Gelt Show with money maven Doug Goldstein. Doug's weekly radio show is heard around the world, but if you miss it, you can download the podcast at www.goldsteinongelt.com. The Goldstein on Gelt Show gives you up-to-date financial ideas so you can get on the path to financial freedom. If you'd like your questions answered on the air or off, send Doug an email to doug@profile-financial.com. It's your money for your future, so join Doug every week to build your wealth on the Goldstein on Gelt Show.